The focus of my part of the presentation and the associated paper is really on open to ideas and how information from research projects flows onto farms and then washes around the farmer decision-making process. I want to use a project from here in Victoria as an example of one of these research projects that's creating information. I want to go through what decisions farmers make, some of the questions that our project considers and how that feeds into the actual decisions being made on farm, where farmers find the information that they use to make these decisions, some of the information that we produce, and then how we target our extension. So how do we get these information inputs on farm and make them a part of the farmer decision making and make it have a real impact with our work. I'll then tidy up with a little bit of how well it works and some of the evaluation that we've got from our extension program. I'm a part of the Dairy Directions project, which is a multidisciplinary team here in Victoria. We've got scientists, economists, farmers, consultants, the works, and we're looking at a certain subset of decisions on farm. Before I go into that, I just want to go through what decisions there are on farms and then how we've positioned ourselves. When looking at classifying decisions on farm, there's really two measures that we can use. One depends on time and on consequence of the decision, which gives us the top three categories on the screen. And then there's another classification which depends on the experience of the farmer itself. And that gives us the structured or unstructured decisions. The operational decisions are those decisions that farmers are making every day. It's how much pasture to give to cows, it's how many kilos of grain to feed in the dairy, it's which drug we give her for mastitis this week. It's the decisions that are so ingrained and within 1 or 2 years of being on farm are just made on experience. Farmers know how to do it. If a new drug's come out or a new pasture variety is available, they might go and get a bit of information, have a bit of a chat to some friends. But they're the really simple decisions. They don't lag into any future time periods, although they do have a cumulative effect if they're made consistently well or consistently badly. The tactical decisions are the next level up. These are the decisions that are made within a production period. So when we're thinking about dairy farms, it's the annual decisions. It's setting our production targets for our cows. It's determining what crop or pasture species we're going to use. And so that's the next level up. Again, they shouldn't have much of a lagged effect, maybe a little bit, but they should really be over and done with and reversible within one production period if things go wrong. The next level, this is the highest level of decision that farmers make. These are the long-term decisions. They're the major decisions. They're costly, they're expensive, they're lagged. If you make this decision really well, it can have wonderful effects for many years. But if it goes badly, you can be spending many years and many production periods trying to reverse it. These are the decisions that involve an enormous amount of information gathering, information evaluation, and navel gazing before you can come up with the right part. The structured and unstructured is a spectrum that goes over every decision made on farm. Farmers with experience and understanding in the area that they've seen before, these are decisions that are structured. They've seen them, they can make them based on experience alone. And then it flows right through the semi-structured where you've seen something similar, get a little bit more information and can make a decision based on that. Right through to the unstructured, which is the whole new world. This is where we've got to go out, we've got to find out what the problem means and then start researching how we may overcome it and what decision we might make. For those of us like Bill who prefer pictures to words, this is Gray's depiction of what I've just described. The axis down the left-hand side of the screen gives you the strategic, tactical and operation decisions that I've just described. Gray also split this decision-making process up into the phases. There's planning, the implementation and the control phases of the decision. He also split it up into the different sections of the farm where decisions may be focused. You can also see that spectrum of structured through unstructured decisions as well. So with Dairy Directions, we're really focused on that top left-hand corner, the strategic, particularly unstructured decisions on farm, generally around production or finance. We tend not to get into the other areas very much. They're very major decisions. They're things like building a new dairy, purchasing additional land, altering our mix of owned to leased land, making large changes to stocking rate, really having a substantial impact on how the farms run. It's a whole farm systems model, so we start with the biophysics and say if we make this change, what's it going to do to our energy production, our energy requirements, and we work right up through profit, cash flow, growth and risk. We look at the farm, how it's running now, and how it will look if we run it the way it is for 10 years, and then we make changes to that farm. We try and look at what challenges the farm may face, and then what options it's got to try and mitigate those effects. This is a horrendogram, and please don't try and read it all, but it's just an indication of some of the things farmers are dealing with when they go out into the world and try and find information about the process, about a decision. There's all these people out there driving down the driveway, sending them advertisements and trying to get their information out there. Farmers are in overload, and so we've got to think about how they cull that information and how they process that information before we can work out our extension activities. This is a diagram that's in more detail in the paper. It was described by Phillips in 1985. It's a part of his master's project. And it's just about how the process of farm decision making and culling and evaluating that information. So once they've gone to this horrendogram and they've gathered an enormous volume of information, they then come down to what Phillips described as the evaluation circle. This is a slightly more trusted network, I suppose, where the farmers can say, this is the information I've got, what do you guys reckon? Their consultant is an obvious go-to person for that. Extension officers from government or private sectors, their factory field officer, friends and neighbours. Discussion groups are also a really good opportunity to bash around this kind of information. Farmers also have a final filter. This is the trusted circle, if you will. This is the people that are going to be affected by the decision. And so, yeah, that final level. The consultant, those that are really heavily involved in farm decision making and farm planning, the family and the friends associated with that particular farm. There's also one other group up there that farmers probably prefer weren't involved in the decision, but do often have the final say on what happens, and that's the bankers and the accountants. The final decision maker himself, of course, is the farmer or herself, and they're the ones that have to make that final decision. So this is how Phillips described the process, and you don't have to follow where all of these lines go, but it just shows you how a fairly simple decision, such as how to prevent milk fever in a herd, only requires a small amount of information gathering and a little bit of evaluation before the decision can be made. Whereas you look at the problem on the right-hand side of the screen, which is the decision about building a new shed, which is really in that strategic, unstructured area, where there was an enormous amount of information gathering, evaluation, discussion. He came back to talk to the support group and then went out for more information. And it's really that process that's involved in making those large decisions on farm. So we looked at that and thought, how can we extend our information? In a world that's overloaded by information, we can run field days, we can put articles out in the media, and of course we do that, but we're only adding to the information overload through that process. One other thing that we do is run farmer workshops, and this is a way of talking about a case study farm, and Bill calls it farm management economics by stealth. We get them to come and talk about a farm and try and slip in a bit of principles about farm management economics while they're not paying attention. And that works fairly well to some extent, but as a group of scientists and economists, we're really limited in how many farmers we can reach. So we came up with a third approach, which is targeting that evaluation and that support group. Those people that are there when the farmers are filtering information and when they're making that final decision. So we run workshops for bankers, accountants and factory field staff, and we're really trying to train that group up to some extent in farm management economics, but also in the decision-making process and how to ask the right questions. These are just some of the comments that we've had from our bankers and accountants workshops, and it's a really good indication to me that it's starting to work. We're getting the right messages across. So giving them a greater knowledge to assess lending proposals, that's very nice. we found a lot of people are surprised at the outcome. The first time we took this out to bankers and accountants was by accident. We were at one of these farmer forums and the consultant had invited some bankers along, and the option we were looking at was purchasing more land, purchasing more milking area. And the result that looked the most profitable, according to our analysis, was purchasing more land and not milking any more cows. He was actually purchasing the land to reduce his stocking rate and reduce his reliance on purchased feed. Was able to increase his operating profit and reduce his exposure to these feed markets and reduce his variability in profit. And we showed this to this group, and the farmers sort of nodded. And the banker came up to us afterwards and said he was just blown away by that, because in their training, the first question they have to ask when someone comes and says, I want to buy more land, is how many more cows are you going to milk? And we'd just shown that that wasn't necessarily the relationship that you had to make. And you might be a lot less exposed if you can buy your land and then build your herd up again slowly if you do want to milk more cows. Or you can just purchase land and milk what you've got. So that's a really important outcome for us to get out there. This third dot point was a really good one as well, which is how variability impacts on the whole farm system. It's really nice to look at the averages, but unless we can see how much that fluctuates and how a change is going to impact on the risk profile of that business and how much his profit's going to vary, it's not really that meaningful. The other thing that our workshops have tried to really get across is the complexity involved in these decisions. And that's not something that bankers and accountants are exposed to that often. They see the finance side of it, but they don't see everything else that has to go behind that final decision. You know, all the different steps that are involved in getting the biophysical side of the farm right when you're making one of these changes. And the dot point at the bottom there was the best for me. That was giving me a few more questions to ask. And really there's nothing better for a banker or an accountant when going out on farm than to know a few extra questions to ask that's really going to help the farmer sort out in his mind whether he wants to spend $2 million on any dairy. So in conclusion, our project really focuses on the strategic, unstructured decisions, which are the decisions that a lot of farmers and consultants and field officers don't have the time, energy or resources to really deal with properly. We chose to extend our information to the support networks rather than the farmers themselves, because hopefully we can inform some more decisions than we would if we were going directly to farmers. And the focus of our extension is really in improving that decision-making process. We're not about giving people an answer, we're just stepping through the process and working out how you can do it better. So that's us.
Good.